However, prospects in Texas looked promising for a man like Houston, willing to take the risks entailed in fishing troubled waters, so he concluded his Indian affairs and applied for land in Tejas. Elias Rector, an official with excellent reputation, later swore that this conversation took place on Houston's departure. Elias Rector says, "Houston, I wish to give you something before we separate, and I have nothing that will do as a gift except for my razor." Sam Houston says, "Rector, I accept your gift, and mark my words, if I have luck, this razor will someday shave the chin of a president of the republic." Others who heard Rector report the conversation immediately after it was supposed to have taken place testified that the final response was slightly more grandiose. Sam Houston says, "Elias, remember my words. I will yet be the president of a great republic. I will bring the nation to the United States, and if they don't watch me closely, I will be the president of the White House yet." In 1833, he arrived in Nacogdoches, took up temporary residence, and even represented the area in a constitutional convention, where he performed as a sober, responsible voice, preaching caution. There was rumor that he sent back to Arkansas for his Indian wife Tiana Rogers, but she did not join him and thus passes from history, until the arrival of a later member of her distinguished Cherokee family, the political humorist Will Rogers. His taste of Tejas life was apparently not heady enough to make Houston want to stay in the turbulent area permanently, for the end of 1833 saw him back among his Cherokee friends. In 1834, however, he returned to Mexico so determined to own more land that he was willing to convert to Catholicism to obtain it, a prudent rather than a spiritual decision. Decades previously, when the Mexican government watched the first groups of Americans come streaming into Tejas with Protestant affiliations, the government had passed a law which would protect the Catholic religion. If you want free land here, you must convert. Three of the prominent Americans in Tejas, Stephen Austin, its founder, Jim Bowie, its defender, and Sam Houston, its leader, were accused by their neighbors of converting only to obtain land. The first two did so seriously, but Houston with fingers crossed. As soon as he received his land, Houston apparently reverted to the stern Protestantism of Tennessee. It was now that Houston wrote two important letters which gave evidence of his ability to make sober estimates of complex situations. In one of the letters, he made four shrewd observations. The situation in Tejas cannot remain as it is now. The second one, Tejas will not be acquired by the United States during the administration of General Jackson, for his sense of honor will not permit this. Number 3, even if Tejas were acquired by treaty, the present Senate would not allow its admission as a state because of the slavery problem. And number 4, Tejas must look to herself and do for herself, and within a year she will produce events of importance to her future and beneficial to her prosperity. In the other letter, Houston even more bluntly predicted that within 1 year, Tejas would be a sovereign state within the Mexican system, and within 3, it would be separated from Mexico and would remain so forever. His observations displayed extraordinary perspicacity, and a subtle understanding of both the American and the Mexican mind. But when referring to his own probable future, he either guessed wrong or lied, for in the same letters he added this contradictory note. Many suppose that such events will be sought by us, but in this their notions will be gratuitous, I assure you. The course that I may pursue, you must rely upon it, shall be for the true interest of Tejas, as I may believe, and if it can be done as it ought to be, to preserve her integrity to the Confederacy of Mexico. The fact that he had converted to Mexico's religion and accepted citizenship in that country suggests that his intentions were honorable, at least on the surface, but his behavior in Tejas took him step by irrevocable step towards revolution. At first, he claimed only that he was defending the right of Coahuila y Tejas under the Constitution of 1824 to separate into two states, Coahuila south of the Nueces River with Saltillo as its capital, Tejas to the north with San Felipe de Austin, or some similar settlement as its capital. He wrote to New Orleans suggesting that volunteers rush into Tejas to speed the break, and he took to issuing wildly provocative calls to duty as well as challenges to Mexican authority. In his predilection for the florid pronunciamiento, he was beginning to resemble Santa Anna, but it is sobering to note that both his and all other such cries from Tejas, after first stressing patriotism and the defense of freedom, always pointed out to listeners that much good land would be their reward for volunteering if they rushed in bringing their guns. Patriotism and profit could move forward in tandem. Since the American immigrants occupied only a narrow segment of Tejas, the strip of land inward from the Gulf of Mexico, most settlers knew the other families in the area, and Houston now came into contact with 4 immigrants whose lives were, for a few shattering weeks, to be intertwined with his in the forging of a new nation. Jim Bowie, a Tennessee frontier fighter 40 years old, had lived in Tejas since 1828 and after converting to Catholicism, had married into a prestigious Mexican family. His reputation was shadowy and violent, knife fighter with a horrendous 12-inch blade that now carries his name, alligator wrestler in the bayous of Louisiana, silver mine seeker in the desert, operator of a cotton mill in Coahuila, slave runner, landowner, patriot. Volatile and courageous, he did not seek trouble but faced it when it stumbled into his path. He had killed at least one man in a knife duel, and probably several others. His beautiful Mexican wife had died in 1833 after only 2 years of married life, killed by cholera, which swept the area. He was distraught, lonely, and ready for adventure. Davy Crockett was older than either Houston or Bowie, having been born in Tennessee in 1786. Tall like Houston, he had also served in the Tennessee legislature and for 3 terms in the National Congress, where he distinguished himself as a Whig who refused to kowtow to the narrow wishes of his constituents or to the dictates of President Jackson, a Democrat. When his fiery independence cost him his seat in Congress, he told the voters, "You may all go to hell. I'm going to Texas." And like others of that time who had experienced defeat, he lit out for the wild adventures that then available in Tejas, abandoning his family. He arrived with a reverberating reputation as a frontiersman, having fought Indians throughout the southeast and claiming to have killed more than 100 bear in one 8-month period. He crossed the border into Tejas the last day of December 1835. William Travis was youngest of the 4, only 26 years old, a moody, disorganized lawyer from South Carolina. Like Davy Crockett, he had abandoned his wife and children, but in his case, there were extenuating circumstances. He seems not to have fled his small town in Alabama willingly. He killed a man who had reputed to be his wife's lover. Her second child, a girl born after Travis left, was probably the child of some other man. At any rate, he arrived in Tejas alone in 1831, announcing in one sworn statement that he was single, later that he was a widower. When his wife tried to effect a reconciliation, he spurned her and instead sought a divorce. Bellicose, temporal, brave, he received a commission in the informal rebellious army and volunteered his services to General Houston, who recognized him as a man difficult to discipline, but splendid to rely upon in the time of trouble. A man with a troubled background, Travis would, as he faced death, write one of the noblest letters of American history, a communication whose splendid words would echo throughout Texas for all time. James Walker Fannin, Jr., who would become the martyred hero of Goliad, was only 31 on the eve of revolution and is unquestionably the most difficult of the 4 to understand. An appointee to West Point from Georgia, he quit after 2 unsatisfactory years, but therefore considered himself a military genius. Desperate for money, he had earlier, like Jim Bowie, run African slaves legally from Cuba to Georgia to Tejas. When he immigrated to Tejas in 1834, he brought his wife and 2 daughters with him. Extraordinarily vain, he hoped to become commanding general of the rebellion. When this was denied him, however, and Sam Houston was elected by the Provisional Tejas government to command the army, he bit his lip and proved unusually energetic in whatever job was given to him, appointing himself a one-man committee of correspondence in an attempt to enlist West Pointers to the cause. He was demonstratively brave and not loath to strike out on his own. He was capable, if sometimes confused, leader. There were many such volatile American spirits in Tejas in the closing months of 1835, most of them residents of the Mexican state for only a few years, and in some cases a few months or even weeks. The attitudes held between them and the other contending parties, the natives of Mexico, would color their relationships. Mexicans, especially Peninsulares born in Spain, and the Criollos, with their strong Spanish affinities, even though born in Mexico, believed the Americans who had invaded their state of Quality Tejas to be lacking in grace, culture, and ability. Indeed, the defenders of Spanish glory often described the Americans as unlettered barbarians and infidels asking for chastisement. It was going to shock these overconfident Americans when they found that the despised Mexicans would win the first military encounters. General Santa Anna and his supporting officers knew how to fight and how to win. The Americans would win only one major battle, the one that counted, the last one. It was apparent to President Santa Anna, as leader of Mexico, that some dramatic action was needed to bring these obstreperous Yankees to their senses. So he dispatched his young brother-in-law, General Martin Cos, to San Antonio de Bejar to discipline them. With great fanfare, General Cos, who seems to have been just another routine officer elevated to high office by nepotism, marched north with a military commission, which also entitled him to serve as civil governor. He found he would first have to settle a dispute between 2 cities, each of which claimed to be the capital of the huge state. Saltillo backed by Santa Anna's position of a strong central government, but nearby Monclova defended the concept of states' rights. Cos naturally decided with his relative, Santa Anna. Forced to use the army to settle the affair in Saltillo's favor, Cos then left Coahuila and proceeded toward Tejas, the northern part of the hyphenated state, announcing that he would expel all Americans who had infiltrated the area since 1830. This would include Houston, Travis, and Fannin, and men like Crockett who had not yet come across the border. Furthermore, he was going to arrest all Federalists suspected of opposing the imposition of the new centralist constitution. Judging from what had happened in Zacatecas and Tampico, these would be shot. General Cos seemed well on his way to subduing the incipient rebellion without aid from his brother-in-law, but at Bejar, an informal collection of tough-minded local citizens rallied, and with a superb sense of military deportment which ought to have alerted the Mexican leadership as to the possible qualities of the other settlers, drove Cos not only out of Bejar, but out of Texas as well. Historians have not been able to unravel the resultant confusion. The victorious Texicans, as they were beginning to call themselves, allowed Cos and his troops to march south unmolested because the Mexican officers had given solemn purpose, some say in writing, to leave Tejas. That much is clear, but the Texans later claimed that Mexicans had also promised that they would never return to take arms against the settlers, who at this point in late 1835 wanted only a separate state of their own, not associated with Coahuila, and the right to all freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution of 1824. This Santa Anna could not grant, nor could he honor his brother-in-law's pledge never again to fight against the Tejanos. "To hell with your vague promises," Santa Anna cried. "Your men will join my army. We will invade Tejas and put it to the sword." And with this terrible intention, he prepared to march north to his confrontation with General Houston, frontiersman Davy Crockett, brooding William Travis, would-be General James Fannin, and knife-wielding Jim Bowie, a Mexican citizen of good standing.